I'll read the summary.
Oh, okay.
The summary can be read. And you'll probably figure out the author as we go along.
Oh.
Old recordings can provide a window to days long since past, to both heartwarming memories and devastating events. There's wisdom to be gained by learning from the tragic mistakes of the past, but what happens when the wrong lessons are learned? In a quiet and lonely room, the static on a television provided the only source of light, casting a dim, flickering glow on the face of a child. They were sitting on their knees, close to the television set, watching. The only sound, other than the hum of a distant fan, was the whirring motor of an ancient VCR as it ejected a featureless black tape labeled simply "Number 2." The child leaned forward and pulled the tape out of the machine. They smiled as they slid it back into its worn box. There had been nothing to watch on it, technically. Just as with the previous tape, it contained only one recording and had only audio with no video. They would have liked to see a video of the excited, beaming mother as she told her mom jokes earlier. They wished they could have seen the excited boy, who had apparently tried to record his sister making a creepy face. But it wouldn't have helped. He would have been out of view behind the camera, even if he had remembered to remove the lens cap. Still, it would have been nice to have a glimpse into that world of long ago. A world that had been happy, bright, and full of joy and love. Until... I found these weird tapes. I don't feel like Asgore's watched them. I don't think he should. Next to the TV was a neat stack of 3 other video cassettes, each labeled with a number. On the floor was tape number 1, played a few minutes earlier. The child put the box they were holding onto the floor, then took the next box from the stack. The machine accepted the tape with a whir, and the flickering static went black. There was no picture, just as with the previous cassette. Once again, the same cheerful voice came through the speakers. "Now you're smiling for no reason!" "What? Oh, yeah, I remember. When we tried to make butterscotch pie for Dad, right?" The cheerfulness faded. "Those flowers got him really sick. I feel so bad. Anyway, where were you going with this?" "Huh? Turn off the camera." With a soft clunk, the machine stopped. But the child didn't move. They remained where they were, staring into the static, their smile gone, a despondent look now on their face. Slowly they bowed their head and rubbed the corners of their eyes. Tape number 3 was ejected and added to the pile on the floor. Reluctantly, the child reached up and took the next one from the stack. But they hesitated, lost in thought, tapping their fingers on the box. Their eyes drifted up to the shelves filled with similar boxes next to the TV. They replaced the tape on the stack and stood up to look at the shelves more closely. The light wasn't strong enough to easily read the spines, but the child eventually picked out a gaudy one, whose label of "Adventures" made it stand out. The box, decorated with colorful felt stars, was old and torn at the edges, and the child handled it gingerly as they pulled the tape out and pressed it into the VCR. The white static on the TV was replaced with a grainy view of a bedroom. The camera was sitting on the floor, pointing at a faded and frayed carpet. Standing on the carpet was a plastic wrestler, 4 inches tall and wearing a permanent sneer. Next to him was a man in combat fatigues, holding a bazooka. On the ground between them was a stuffed sack with a large letter G on it, roughly the same height as the 2 action figures. The picture on the TV shook for a moment as the camera was readjusted. Then a white furry hand reached in from the side and picked up the wrestler, who bounced as he addressed his companion. "Ha ha ha!" said a menacing child's voice. "We've done it, Captain Kablamo! We've robbed the bank of all their gold! The monsters were defenseless against us!" His bent arm was twisted upwards to highlight his massive biceps. The wrestler then returned to the floor, and a moment later the fuzzy white hand picked up the military figure. "That's right, Facebuster," said the voice, a little strained now that it was an octave lower. "The monsters down here were no match for our human powers." The soldier poked the bag with his plastic arms. "Now we can use our secret exit to leave and take all this gold back to our base. Ha ha ha!" Facebuster reacted by toppling onto his back, possibly due to the carpet being scrunched up as Captain Kablamo did a celebratory dance. There was a grunt of annoyance from somewhere, and the picture shook briefly before going black as the recording stopped. A second later, though, it was back, with both criminals standing next to the sack. "Hold it right there!" commanded an off-screen voice. Swooping in from above, another figure landed. It was hard to make out the details of the new arrival, except that he was soft and floppy, wrapped entirely in purple, had plush horns sewn onto his head, and was roughly 3 times the size of the plastic criminals he was now confronting. "Oh no!" shouted one of the unmoving action figures. "It's Arizel!"
Wait, is this for you?
Why, yes, it is.
What?
Yes, this is my story.
Huh. I was starting to wonder that about like 1 minute before you said that.
Yes, I figured it might.
Hold up, okay,
your
action
story.
figures. I wonder, this is like the kind of thing Daddy would write.
Yep, I
Oh,
figured
wait a minute.
it is the sort of thing.
Actually, this actually would allow fit. Actually, yeah, he might actually fit.
I was like, wow,
Oh yeah,
did someone...
he mentioned Kara was the sister. Actually, that might fit.
I was
Oh,
like,
well,
wow,
okay.
did someone copy Daddy's story? Wait, never mind. This is probably Daddy's story.
Stuffed Arizel?
Yeah.
I was
sure.
like, yeah, well, you write you made them write comics, so yeah, they could technically. That
Does that
could
mean you've got
technically be a
other
thing.
one shots in the works?
It just means that this was a period of time when
Yeah, I know, but like I was just thinking. Briefly,
when he
like-
had a stuffed.
Yeah, but I was just
Stuffed
thinking
Arizel.
briefly, like, oh, would that fit with what you would write? Yeah, I guess it would.
Turns
Whatever.
out it does pretty well. Yeah. Yes, this is the point of the story at which you figure out who wrote it. So, yeah. I hope you're enjoying my story.
But I was wondering slightly, but not like super seriously.
Yes, I hoped I could. I figured I would be in danger as soon as the
And then, yeah,
came
and-
to the bedroom, but I made it. I made
You
it.
got to the bedroom.
I made it to Arizel being announced before
And then
I
was
totally
like, oh,
gave
a
myself
plush thing.
away.
Yeah, that sounds so.
Yeah, a plush Arizel. The stuffed purple monster jiggled as he pointed his arm at the men. "That gold belongs to the people of Snowville! You two humans are going to jail! Surrender now! And tell me where the secret exit to the caverns is, or I'll use my mind-reading machine on you to find out!" "I'll stop him! Take this, Arizel!" shouted Facebuster, who was propelled towards the stuffed animal in the grip of another furry hand. Hi-ya! The wrestler twisted in the air to execute a flying double kick at the face of Arizel. At the last moment, the purple hero dodged the attack and swung his floppy arm to pummel the wrestler. "Ah!" screamed Facebuster as he twisted end over end to finally fall rigidly on his face onto the carpet. "You'll pay for that, Arizel!" yelled the soldier, swinging his plastic bazooka up. Whoosh! Arizel leapt into the air as the invisible rocket flew under him and performed a mid-air flip, landing with a crushing stomp on the soldier, who crumpled to the ground on his back, one leg sticking straight up. "Gah!" bellowed the captain. After
Azrael saying all of this.
yeah, pretty much. After that pummeling, neither he nor the prone wrestler offered any more resistance, and soon Arizel had them pinned to his chest under his floppy arms. He hauled them off to jail, somewhere off-screen, then flew back to announce that he would be returning the sack of gold to the good monsters of Snowville. The screen went blank after that for a few moments, and then another recording began. The child settled in for the next adventure, and for several minutes they watched story after story, a wistful smile on their face. "My sensors tell me that this mountain is full of gold!" The purple-clad monster was being held on a table this time, in what appeared to be a living room. The rounded ends of the monster's plush arms had no fingers or claws, but a small pointed stick had been carefully tied to each one with thread. Standing next to the monster was a plastic anime girl, with pigtails down to her waist, wearing a long sailor dress and holding a sword that was roughly the same size as her. In front of them was a towering, carefully constructed wall of cushions. A large plastic spider lurked menacingly behind it. The plush monster poked the cushions. "If we smash our way into it, we'll probably find 1,000 pieces of gold we can bring back to the royal treasury. What do you—" There was a pause, and then the white hand put the stuffed animal down. The screen jiggled briefly as someone shook the table, getting up. A moment later, in the living room behind the table, a furry goat monster walked into view. The child watching the television froze. "Hey, Kara," called the monster. "Do you want to come and do Kaira? I'm filming the story about the mountain full of The image stopped moving. The child pulled their finger back from the pause button and stared. The goat monster stood there, looking somewhere beyond the living room with his bright green eyes, his soft muzzle open as he called to someone. Even in the graininess of the old tape, the excitement and enthusiasm shining on his face was clear. Azrael Dreamer, Prince of Monsters. Kara, the broken and helpless girl he had rescued when she fell into the underground. A girl who would become his sister and best friend. A friendship that would carry the bright promise that the animosity between men and monsters could be overcome. Azrael and Kara Dreamer, the hope of all monster kind. Until one day... For several minutes the child stared. Their smile had vanished. There was a slight tremor to their breath. After a while they slowly reached forward and pressed play. "Treasure and gold, and we're just about to smash our way into it!" called the monster child. A distant voice answered indistinctly. "Oh, come on, it'll be fun," the furry boy pleaded. "I don't have to use the Chaos Sabers. You could just punch your way into it if you want. It's a pillow mountain, so it'll look cool when you do." The voice replied again, more insistent this time. The child leaned forward and turned the volume up as high as it could go to pick out snatches of sentences. "No, Azrael. I have time to play. Besides, really not that... too busy. Later." The boy's shoulders slumped. "Okay, Kara, maybe later." He turned and slowly walked out of view. The picture shook slightly. Then the purple stuffed animal was picked up from the table, followed by the spider and the girl with the sword. The mountain of cushions was knocked onto the floor. After a lingering shot of the scattered pillows, the picture went black. The digital counter on the VCR continued to advance, but the screen stayed black. The child stared at the darkness and waited, but no more adventures appeared. A few minutes later, the motor stopped as the tape came to an end. Sniffling quietly, the child ejected the tape and slid it gently, almost reverently, back into its cheerful box and placed it on the floor. Reluctantly, they looked at the stack next to the TV, then reached out and took tape number 4 into their hands. The tears had welled up enough to begin falling down their cheeks. Once again their resolve failed them. For a moment they looked back up at the shelf, hoping to find something, anything, that could distract them. Something that could delay what had to happen next. Couldn't it wait? Couldn't it wait just a little longer? But with a shuddering breath, they lowered their head to look at the tape they were holding. They had no choice, really. The make-believe adventures had ended long ago. What they held in their hands was reality. This was truth that had to be faced. With a horror, the machine sucked in tape number 4 and began playing it. Once again, the flickering gray static was replaced by a black image. Even without visuals, it wasn't hard to picture the fluffy monster boy talking to his sister, except his voice no longer held the sound of excitement or anticipation. It was the sound of fear. The playful eyes of the boy adventurer would now be filled with tears as Kara criticized him and berated him and pushed him and pushed and pushed. Memories of monsters lining the path through New Home, telling the story of a heartbreaking loss, filled the child's mind. Their words snapped together like jigsaw pieces, with the frightened voice coming from the TV. I don't like this idea, Kara. Then, one day, the human became very ill. What? No, I'm not. Big kids don't cry. The next day, the human died. No, I'd never doubt you, Kara, never. Tears were now streaming down the child's face. They reached out a hand for just a moment, but stopped before it touched the VCR's controls. Instead, they sat back, pulled their knees up to their chest, and buried their face as they took shaky, stuttering breaths. The voice didn't stop. The memories wouldn't stop. Yeah, we'll be strong. We'll free everyone. Azrael, racked with grief, absorbed the human's soul. He carried the human's body into the sunset. I'll go get the flowers. The humans attacked him with everything they had. Wounded, Azrael stumbled home. He entered the castle and collapsed. The child broke down. Quiet sobs shook their body as waves of grief swept over them. The injustice, the tragedy, the tragic misunderstanding, the senseless loss, the death of an innocent child who just wanted to be a friend to his sister, the meaninglessness of the sacrifice. No, far worse than that, the utter darkness and ruin that came from the sacrifice that was supposed to bring joy and freedom, the sheer stupidity of the plan, the cruelty of the girl who manipulated her brother and sent him to his own slaughter, the girl he had thought was his best friend, who had repaid his kindness by killing the kind-hearted prince, destroying the lives of his parents, and plunging the kingdom into despair. The girl, Kara, the demon who destroyed everything she touched. For a long while the child remained slumped on the floor, shaking, wishing they could just leave the room and never return. And yet, one more tape remained to be played. The final act of the tragedy. It had to be played. It had to. The cassette in the machine was ejected and discarded onto the floor. Trembling, the child reached for the last tape sitting next to the TV. They stared at the number 5 written on it, so simple and yet so menacing. It took all their determination to go through with it, but after a struggle, they finally shoved the tape into the machine and pressed play, then immediately pulled away, buried their head between their knees, and closed their eyes. The recording began with the usual shuffling noises as the camera was moved into place. Silence followed for a few moments. Then the voice of the monster boy came out of the TV. "Are you ready?" "Yeah, go ahead," a new voice responded. The child's head snapped up. On the TV was a scene of a yard. The picture was crisp and saturated with color, much clearer than the grainy scenes on the videotape of adventures. Part of a swing set was visible on the left side of the screen, and a row of thick trees lined the background. Above the trees, several wispy clouds streaked across a blue sky. Standing in the center of the picture, rubbing his furry hands together, was Azrael. With his striped green shirt, he looked almost identical as to how he had looked back when he was filming adventures with action figures, except he was now slightly older, and a bit taller, and standing in a backyard under a blue sky. The girl sitting on the floor stared at the TV in astonishment. She picked up the empty tape box and looked at it in confusion. "Okay, hi, Kara." The girl's wide eyes snapped back to the TV. The boy gave a shy wave to the camera. "It's me, Azrael," Azrael added helpfully. "Your best friend." "Wait, what does that make me?" said the other unseen voice, presumably the one holding the camera. "Oh, you're my very best brother." "Oh, wow," said the monotone voice. "Your best brother, what an incredible honor." The goat prince narrowed his eyes and pointed a finger at the person behind the camera. "Hush!" A small beam of rainbow light and dancing stars burst from his finger and sailed over the top of the screen. "Ah, stop! Anyway," said Azrael, rolling his eyes as he put his hand down, "like I was saying, it's me, Azrael." "We've established that, Azzy." "Anyway," the goat boy said loudly, "me and Frisk are making a video for you that we're going to put on a videotape. And if you're watching it now, I guess you must be watching it. Or, you will be watching it after we finish this video and get it off the phone and figure out how to put it onto the VCR, which I guess we did since you're watching it now. Later, after we do it. But now, for you. I think we've got it, Azzy, thanks. Yeah, sorry. Anyway, we wanted to make a video for you that we thought would be nice and fun. Instead of..." The boy began to fidget with his shirt. His eyes flicked to the side. "You know, that other stuff? I hope that's okay, that we're taping over what was already on the tape. I figured that you watch it sometimes, and I guess I hope it's okay we're doing this, because, I don't know, it doesn't seem like those tapes are good for you. The boy gestured helplessly and looked above the camera again. Hang on. The picture shook wildly as the camera was propped up on a table and adjusted, while Azrael watched on. A moment later, another boy, dressed in blue and purple, joined him. "It's like this, Kara," he said. "Azzy and I were in your room trying to find the Book of Atris." "What? You said that it'd be okay if I borrowed it?" added the prince quickly. "Yes."
Why?
Why do you want to borrow it? Well,
No.
I've heard it's a good book. It's in Kara's bedroom.
Why would
Kara
why
likes
wouldn't it be?
Kara likes fantasy and stuff.
Anyway.
You said it would be okay if I borrowed it, added the prince quickly. Yeah, so we couldn't find it on the bookshelves, so we were looking on the shelves in the closet, and, well, I found these videotapes. And when I saw that they were just labeled 1 through 5, I remembered that I had seen them before, and I knew what was on them. Azrael had lowered his head and was kneading his hands again. And Frisk was all upset, and I asked them what they were, and he didn't really want to tell me, but then he did, and, well, I ended up watching them too. I didn't want you to, Frisk protested. But I wanted to because I needed to know, insisted Azrael, looking at his brother. He turned back to the camera. Because I know how you think, Kara. I figured you were probably not being nice to yourself. The girl sitting on the floor stared at the fuzzy boy on the screen. Azrael was twisting his own ear, obviously terribly embarrassed. Frisk put an arm around him. I know, started Azrael as he fumbled for words. I know that you still blame yourself for what happened to us all those years ago, even though it turned out okay, and Frisk saved us and stuff, and Mom and Dad are okay now. I know you still do it. And Frisk and I figured you had those tapes in your closet so that you could pull them out and watch them again and get sad. The girl's mouth had fallen open. Without breaking her gaze, she felt behind her for the sofa and pulled herself onto it. Frisk spoke up again. I wanted to take those tapes outside and stomp them to pieces, but Azzy wouldn't let me. Azrael shook his head. He said that was something you ought to decide for yourself rather than us. Sounds dumb to me, since most of them are terrible, but he started crying. Hey! Azrael smacked his brother's shoulder with the back of his paw. Frisk grinned, but before he could reply, a gust of wind whipped through the boy's hair and clothes. Slowly the picture began to tilt upwards. Ah, the phone!
Upward?
Said Frisk, just before he and Azrael were replaced with an image of the sky. After a moment, the picture shook as the phone was picked up and pointed again at Azrael, now standing alone. So, yeah, Kara, Frisk is right. Those tapes are bad for you. You probably watch them because you don't think you deserve to be happy. You feel like that you need to remember all that stuff that happened. I know that you still beat yourself up, even though nobody's angry at you. We're all free now, and Mom and Dad are back together, and we're all okay. I'm okay, too. I'm not mad at you at all. I love you. Once again, tears streamed down the girl's face. Aw, that's sweet, said the unseen boy. Hush, Frisk! Anyway, since Frisk wanted to smash the tapes, and I thought that should be your decision, we decided to compromise. Tape number 5 is just plain awful, so we've decided to redo it into something that will be much better. So, first of all, it's just me telling you that I love you, and that I know we both made some bad mistakes in the past, and did some stuff we never should have done, but that I forgive you for anything there needs to be forgiven. I know you didn't want to hurt anybody, and it was just a really bad plan. And yeah, things were bad for a while, but everybody has forgiven you, and we all love you now, and nobody's mad, and you don't have to keep reminding yourself of all that because it's over now. Yeah, added the off-camera voice, and if it hadn't happened, I wouldn't have ever met you or Azzy, so that was a good thing. Azrael's forehead wrinkled. That's really weird, Frisk. Hey, it's the truth. Well, anyway, that's what I wanted to tell you, Kara. You're a great sister, and you're still my best friend forever. He held up a golden locket on a chain around his neck. And I hope you'll always believe it. Without noticing, the girl slid her hand up to the chain around her own neck, to the simple locket that had comforted her again and again. "And if you ever forget, you can just watch this video again. And now it's Frisk's turn. Yeah, I got something too." Azrael jogged towards the camera, and the TV was filled with noise and shaking as the phone changed hands. When it settled down, Frisk was standing by the swing set again, bouncing in excitement. He looked off to his left. "Is it still going? Don't point it at the thing yet." "Yeah, the red light's still flashing," said the monster's voice. Even as he spoke, the scene suddenly shifted. Instead of Frisk, the picture now showed Azrael's face, as seen from slightly below his muzzle. He didn't look down. His green eyes were fixed on the scene in front of him. "Okay."
We accidentally switched the camera.
"Okay, here it is. Surprise!" called out Frisk. The camera turned slightly, still pointing at Azrael. "This may look like an ordinary sparkler and fireworks display," continued the unseen Frisk, "but it's been specially designed to cheer you up. Dr. Alphys helped make it with magic, so it'll... well, you'll see." "Light it, Frisk," said the excited goat boy. "I want to see what you did." "Okay, here we go. 3, 2, 1. There was a clicking sound as a lighter was tried repeatedly. "Come on," Frisk muttered. Azrael was frozen in rapt attention. Then, "Got it! Here it goes!" For a few seconds there was a hissing and sparking sound. Suddenly the TV erupted with the sounds of pops, screeches, whistles, and bangs. Azrael's mouth fell open in excitement and delight. A spectrum of colors and lights played across his face. "Wow, that is so cool!" he shouted over the noise, jiggling the phone a bit. "The pinwheel rocket is just about to go off! Follow it!" Frisk yelled back. A large boom came out of the TV. The perspective on Azrael's face changed to a top-down view as he lifted the phone, his eyes following some incredible spectacle as it rose into the air. Another boom came from the distance, and the prince screwed his eyes shut as an intense burst of light bathed his face. When he opened them, they were full of wonder as he turned his head back and forth to the sky. "Wow, you did an entire message with magic! That is so sweet! Kara's gonna love it!" "That was awesome!" Frisk called out as the noise slowly died away. "Did you get all that?" "Yeah, I sure..." As the phone swung back down, Azrael finally looked directly at the camera. A confused look spread over his face, and he tilted his head and blinked several times. Slowly, the confusion was replaced with a dawning look of horror. I think... "How'd the recording turn out?" said Frisk, now much closer. Frisk, I think I may have accidentally had it on the front-facing camera." "You what?" The goat prince looked like he wanted to crawl into a hole. His words started coming out faster. "I must have accidentally hit the little thing in the corner that flipped the camera, so it was pointing at me instead. I don't think I got a video of the fireworks." The picture on the TV bumped around. Then the face of a mop-haired boy, now with soot all over his face, pushed in beside Azrael, who sheepishly stepped back. Excuse me. The boy took the phone and stared into the camera in disbelief. "Azrael, you're telling me you took video of your own face for 2 minutes and you didn't even notice?" Azrael's eyes were panicked. "I was so busy watching the fireworks go off that I forgot to look down at the phone." Even though Frisk's eyes were inscrutable, as usual, he looked to the girl on the sofa like someone who was about to gain a hefty amount of EXP. The furry boy in the background looked like he was about to cry. "Frisk, The picture spun wildly, accompanied by shuffling noises, before coming to focus on the yard again. "All right, come here!" commanded the boy. A surprised bleat followed. The next moment, a determined Frisk stomped into the frame, holding a very worried goat boy. He stopped and turned to the camera, still holding Azrael in a death grip. "Sorry, Kara. Turns out you didn't get to see the fireworks display after all. You'll have to take my word for it that it was really cool." Frisk let Azrael go and turned to glare at him. The monster seemed to shrink under his gaze. He started twisting an ear in his paw. "You might think that Azrael is an incredible dope when it comes to cameras," Frisk said, turning back to the camera. Unexpectedly, his expression relaxed, and a hint of a smile came onto his face. "But that's not true. In fact, it's really not Azrael's fault that we didn't get a video of the fireworks." Confusion, mixed with hopefulness, crept onto Azrael's face. It wasn't? Nope." Frisk was fully smiling now, as he flung an arm around the furry boy's shoulders. "Azrael didn't do anything wrong." "Oh." The relief on Azrael's face was obvious. "Oh, thanks, Frisk. Was the phone not working right, or something?" "It was your fault!" yelled Frisk, clamping the boy into a headlock. Ignoring the strangled thrashing under his arm, he turned back to the camera. "This isn't Azrael at all! This is really our arch-nemesis Lesere! He imprisoned Azzy somewhere and is trying to sabotage our attempt to make you feel better!" Lesere, by the way, is spelled L-E-Z-I-R-E-A. "What?" squawked out Azrael hoarsely. "I'm not Lesere! I'm always Ares! So now I must defeat him!" yelled Frisk. With another surprised bleat, Azrael toppled onto the ground as Frisk bumped him in the back of the knees. The furry boy barely had time to roll over before his brother dove on top of him, grabbed a floppy ear in each hand, and began whacking him in the face with them. "What have you done with Arizel? Release him or face my wrath!" Stop! "That's Prince Farask to you, Lesere! Release my brother at once!" The girl on the sofa watched with great interest as the ear flogging continued.
How are they getting a video of all this?
He propped the phone back up. Azrael squirmed on the ground, kicking and flailing, sending rainbow bursts out of his hands in random directions. Finally, he managed to buck Frisk off of him and scrambled to his feet in a flash. He pointed heroically at Frisk, who was picking himself up from the ground. In the top corner of the video, a red battery symbol began to flash. "Aha! Now your lies are exposed! I am the real Arizel, and you are a phony Farask! And I will give my sister a cosmic show of my own! Behold my true power!" The prince cackled as he fired off a huge burst of stars into the air. "Oh, no, you don't! Take this, Lesere!" Frisk leapt up and swung a stick he had found at Azrael. It bounced off his side. Azrael ignored him and kept firing stars, spinning his arms above him to send them in all directions. Frisk gamely continued to pummel the goat with his stick. "Ha!" Azrael said, finally dropping his hands. "Doesn't hurt a bit! You don't want to hurt me, so you can't!" He stuck his tongue out at his brother and began to dance in front of him. "You don't want to hurt me! You don't want to hurt me!" He blew a raspberry at Frisk. Frisk shook his stick, but before he could resume the battle, the sound of a car door slamming interrupted the action. Another voice sounded off in the distance. "Hey, I just got home, and what in the world was all that noise out here? What are you guys doing?" Two heads swiveled to the left. The sound of running footsteps could be heard. "Oh, are you doing an adventure?" called the girl's voice. "Who's the bad guy? Frisk opened his mouth, but Azrael was quicker. He grabbed Frisk by the arm. Kyra, help me! This monster has stolen Farask's identity with magic and is trying to destroy me! Oh, no, you don't! Yelled the voice. No, that's less... Frisk tried to say, when a green and yellow blur flew in from the left and plowed into him, causing the two of them to topple off the screen to the right. Azrael watched interestedly as the scuffling on the ground continued next to him. Bits of dirt and leaves floated up off the bottom of the screen. An evil human! How dare you attack Arizel! You must be destroyed! Announced the newcomer. Kyra, I think if he's using magic, he's probably a monster, offered Azrael. Or an evil human wizard! What is your plan? Are you trying to make a new barrier? What have you done with Farask? Answer me! From the muffled protests off camera, it sounded like Kara's hands were pressed over Frisk's mouth as she continued to demand that he confess his crimes and or surrender. Azrael picked up the discarded stick and tested its battle readiness by swinging it a few times as the one-sided scuffle and associated yelling continued unseen on the ground. The small battery symbol flashed a final time, then the screen went dark. The stunned girl on the sofa continued to watch the black image on the screen for another few minutes. A smile began to spread on her face. She slid off the sofa and walked over to the TV. Kneeling down, she collected the tapes from the floor. The star-decorated box went back on the shelf. The other 4 discarded tapes were collected and placed into a grocery bag the girl had used to carry them into the living room. Only then did she press the stop button and eject the tape. In the faint light of the static-filled TV, she looked down at tape number 5 in her hand and smiled even bigger before sliding it back into its box. Without warning, the room was flooded with light. Kara squinted and held her arm up to her face as she turned in the direction of the person who had come into the living room. "Oh, it's you," said her furry brother. He was dressed in light blue pajamas and a dark green bathrobe and was carrying a stuffed purple monster. He padded over to her on his soft feet. "I heard some noise down here, and I'd figured I'd come and... Oh!" He caught sight of the flickering screen. "Were you watching TV?" He spotted the grocery bag and the tape still in her hand. His eyes widened. His forehead furrowed with worry, but almost immediately his eyebrows went up, and a look of excitement came into his eyes. "You were watching those tapes? Did you get to number..." The question was cut off by a squawk as the goat boy was suddenly wrapped in a fierce hug. His own arms came up automatically to hug the girl who was squeezing him tightly. Abruptly, she let him go and gently bopped him on the muzzle, producing a soft bleat. "You're such a dork, Ree. Here." She shoved the bag of videotapes into his paw. "Give 'em to Frisk if you want. I don't need them. Good night, bro." She slid past the stunned prince out of the living room and started up the stairs. "Turn off the TV and the lights when you're done, okay?" she called over her shoulder. At the top of the stairs, she looked back and smiled at him fondly, then headed off to her room carrying the final videotape. The prince was left standing in the living room with a grocery bag, staring after her with an affectionate, if slightly confused, expression on his face.
Great.
The end.
That sounds good.
There you go.
Wow.